Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Air Officer Commanding-in-Chief Training Command, I welcome you to the second day of Run Samvad 2026 on multi-domain operations. Yesterday's session provided us with a clear understanding about the evolution of the concept of multi-domain operations, its requirements, and the options available with the Indian Defence Forces. This was followed by a visualization of the concept of MDO from the land and maritime perspective. Over a period of 4 months, personnel of the Indian Defence Forces have provided over 100 service papers on curated topics related to MDO. These service papers have been evaluated, and the best 6 papers have been selected to be presented here today. In today's sessions, we will first examine the intricacies of doctrinal adaptation and training for MDO, followed by additional concepts pertaining to reimagining operational art for MDO. May I now request the chair for the first session, Vice Admiral A.N. Pramod, Ati Vishish Seva Medal, Yudh Seva Medal, Director General, Naval Operations, to please occupy the seat on the stage. Vice Admiral A.N. Pramod has held key appointments at Directorates of Naval Air Staff and Aircraft Acquisition. The Admiral has also tenanted the appointments of Deputy Commandant, Indian Naval Academy, Assistant Chief of Naval Staff, Air, and Flag Officer Commanding Maharashtra Naval Area. May I now request the speakers for this session to occupy their seats on the stage. The first speaker for this session is Group Captain S.P. Singh, PhD, who has submitted his paper on doctrinal adaptation and training. Group Captain S.P. Singh is a Cat A MFC and is currently posted as DS at College of Air Warfare. He would be covering his talk on MDO versus jointness, doctrinal nuances. The second speaker, Commander Rushwan Razak, has submitted his paper on simulation and wargaming infra for MDO. Commander Razak is a gunnery specialist and is currently posted as DS at the Naval War College. He would be covering his talk on wargaming and simulation for MDO. The last speaker for the session is Colonel Ankush Goyal, who has submitted his paper on civil-military infra and intra-agency collaboration. The Colonel is a signals officer and is presently posted as Colonel Network for Spectrum at Integrated Headquarters of Ministry of Defence Army. He would be bringing out the need for civil-military fusion for MDO in cognitive domain in his talk. Now may I request the chair to take over for further proceedings of the session.
May I have your permission to start the proceedings? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. During the Run Samvad proceedings yesterday, the audience had a fairly good insight into the evolution and key tenets of multi-domain operations. Just to recapitulate, MDO is an evolving concept. It refers to the coordinated, integrated, and synchronized employment of military forces and non-military national capabilities across land, sea, air, cyber, space, and cognitive domain. The key attributes of MDO being the ability to operate in all domains with advanced interoperability, high-intensity, simultaneous standoff and precision strike capabilities capitalizing on the high-end technology, advanced space-based C4ISR capabilities, information, net-centric and data infrastructure for INT, ISR dominance and degrading command and control infrastructure, autonomous systems, AI, data analytics and automation compressing the ISR decision-making and AI-enabled kill chains. MDO as an operational concept was conceived by the US in 2015 to address a Russian threat to NATO and the Baltic states post the annexation of Crimea and siege of Ukraine Donbas region in 2014-15, and also to counter increasingly assertive posture by China in the South China Sea. It was conceptualized to counter main adversaries Russia and China acquiring advanced capabilities of A2AD and A2AD strategy, which challenged the US military domain across all operating environments, which restricted the freedom of maneuver for US forces across all domains. Somebody may pose a question that how it is different from RMA introduced in the 1980s, late 1980s and 90s during Gulf War I in 1901 and in the following conflicts. What has changed? In my view, the ability to undertake high intensity, precision, and high impact operations in a shorter time frame, advent of the technology to disrupt the digital infrastructure which was not there earlier. Case in point, the Stuxnet and the NotPetya attacks, and the ability of China to attack space-based assets, the perceived deep influence of cognitive warfare onto the operations, the employment of uncrewed assets, thus giving us an option to minimize human losses during operations, are the key driving factors for designing the MDO concept. To talk about the nuances of MDO vis-à-vis the joint operations, unlike the joint operations which we were shaping up, and that's why our organizations have come in, where the primary focus is on coordination and integrated ops by the services, MDO as a concept concentrates mainly on the warfighting design aspects towards conduct of simultaneous, kinetic, and non-kinetic actions across all the domains. As we have realized, MDO is a technology-dominant concept and therefore need a technocentric approach. MDO may necessitate military personnel to think and act with a cross-domain mindset, know how the various domains interact, and develop skills in synchronizing military and non-military actions. This may entail review or tweaking the existing organization structures and the training curriculum, with an impetus on common operating picture and joint command and control structure to integrate systems and synchronize multi-domain operations. More exercises, experimentations, simulations, and tabletop exercises at the joint ops level need to be conducted utilizing all advanced training techniques. In the next hour or so, the speakers for this session will present the nuances of MDO, wargaming and simulation aspects, and the civil-military synergy in cognitive domain. May I now request the first speaker, Group Captain Swayam Prakash Singh, to deliver his talk. Thank you.
Jai Hind, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Chair, Headquarter IDS, and the Indian Air Force for giving me this opportunity to speak on topic jointness and multi-domain operations, a critical analysis of doctrinal and training imperative. Before I start, a disclaimer: all views expressed here are personal. This does not belong to any organization or establishment. This is analytical inferences is based on the practitioners and academician know-how. This historical run Samvad was for protecting righteousness based on the merit of matter. And in the same vein, I will endeavor to speak candidly, free from service biases and rhetoric. I shall be covering my talk under three broad sections. First, I shall be analyzing multi-domain operations vis-à-vis jointness. Thereafter, I'll discuss on MDO with a redefined vision of multi-domain, multi-level. And before I flash my policy recommendations, I shall touch upon the implementation timelines. We recently witnessed Op Sindoor, which can be considered as a case study with numerous positivities to it. And as has been narrated in many a times, that although primarily an air war, this was the first declared tri-services military response to a trigger situation. The result-oriented joint operations were not only spread over the adversary's geographical depth, but also a well-calibrated mix of punitive and deterrence at the same time. Despite the success of Op Sindoor, further deliberation is needed on the related yet distinct concept of jointness and MDO. We need to appreciate that while often used interchangeably, they represent different stages of the operational construct. We are well aware of what jointness means in a classical sense. However, I will focus on what jointness in practice is. In practice, jointness has often been mixed with administrative and symbolic integration. Joint education, logistics, maintenance, transport, procurement, and support frameworks are frequently claimed as evidence of progress. While these measures are necessary and beneficial, they remain administrative enablers for routine management rather than indicators of operational jointness. They improve efficiency and reduce duplication, but do not address how combat power is planned, commanded, controlled, and employed in conflict. At best, such measures create a foundation. At worst, they generate an illusion of progress while leaving operational fault lines intact. True jointness is tested only in the operational domain. Persistent debates over control of air defense operations, ownership, employment of aerial assets, intelligence sharing, common planning processes, etc., indicate that jointness remains unresolved, especially at the operational and tactical level. Despite reforms, C2 architecture for planning and operations remains predominantly service-centric and has been the case with non-ratification of Joint Services Study Group on air defense till date. This reality defines the baseline from which the more advanced construct of MDO must be assessed in our scenario. There are existing institutional joint operational structures. Despite decades of existence, the services have yet to achieve the desired operational coherence. Operational experiences indicate that the structure remains effective. However, it requires substantial strengthening rather than restructuring. Existing joint PME between the services right from training days till nearly 3 decades definitely ensures 100% of individual familiarity. But we have to assess ourselves for the operational institutional jointness. Ladies and gentlemen, as the saying goes, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and so does this image. At the same time, it also remains open to interpretation, often shaped by individual convenience of overreaching to other domain, creating a perception of your 6 can be my 9. The bottom line we must internalize is that MDO under various names is all about methodical participation, not the ownership, with a singular purpose to impose a simultaneous dilemma on the adversary. Now I shall move on to the doctrinal analysis. The Joint Doctrine of Indian Armed Forces 2017 represented India's first formal articulation of joint military thought in the open domain. While it did not explicitly address MDO, it acknowledged space, cyber, and special operation as part of the modern conflict environment. The subsequent joint training doctrine, prepared in a collegiate manner, aimed to promote integration and serve as a tri-services foundation and knowledge base. Nevertheless, these initiatives have translated into fully integrated operational processes or command structures. And service-specific doctrines further illustrate this doctrinal fragmentation. These doctrines collectively reveal the existence of multi-domain concepts, albeit through service-specific perspectives. Post-creation of the DMA, there has been a transition from broad conceptual jointness doctrines to more specialized construct, including MDO, which to my mind is an appropriate step in the right direction. My further arguments are aligned to the preface of the said doctrine. The Joint Doctrine for MDO, released at Run Samvad 2025, offers a common framework for cross-domain integration with 6-domain construct. It also formally acknowledges cognitive effect as operationally significant. Although the doctrine marks an important doctrinal advance and outlines key characteristics, structures, and future pathways, its inclusion of cognitive domain and emphasis on whole-of-nation approach remain largely aspirational concepts that require a reasoned dialogue and considered deliberations. A domain of warfare has a precise operational definition of a distinctive and bounded environment in which military forces can be employed, maneuvered, contested, and controlled to achieve military objectives. Land, sea, air, and space meet these criteria. Control within these domains are observable, contestable, and accessible through outcomes such as territorial gain, sea control, air superiority, or space denial. In contrast, the cognitive and cyber construct fail to meet these foundational criteria and should not be equated with a classical war-fighting domain. Cognition is not an environment, but an internal human process shaped by psychology, culture, leadership, military, and social context. It has no independent existence, no terrain, no defensible or seizable boundaries. Military forces cannot maneuver with cognition, and neither can cognitive control be established in a deterministic manner. Cognitive effects such as morale, perception, decision-making, etc., are the outcomes of military operations conducted in a recognized environment and not battle space themselves. Therefore, treating cognition as a domain confuses influence with maneuver and effect with terrain. Cyber, while more tangible than cognition, also differs fundamentally from a classical warfighting domain. Though recognized as an operational domain by the United States, it cannot be occupied or held in a traditional military sense. Cyber is therefore more accurately to be understood as an operational vector or capability set or function rather than a standalone domain of warfare. While whole-of-nation approach is desirable and reflects the contemporary character of conflict, it is executable only if the military instrument achieves the internal coherence through the whole-of-service approach as a prerequisite, that is WOSA. WOSA addresses the foundational challenge of making inter- and intra-services jointness and integration work. Without resolving service-centric seams, expecting effective national-level integration is operationally unrealistic. Doctrinally, WOSA constitutes the operational foundation, while WONA is its strategic extension, and reversing this sequence will definitely weaken execution. So to sum up this section, the image presents physical domains of warfare, that is land, sea, air, and space. The subsurface, that is undersea domain, has received very limited attention in the Western discourse and is therefore yet to gain a wider global recognition. The time is not far when the subsurface will also find a prominent place in warfare literatures. These domains constitute the primary battle space and are predominantly the responsibility of services. Effective MDO therefore hinges on the synergized employment of WOSA, ensuring unity of effort across all domains. Covering these domains are the key cross-cutting functions as depicted in the center column. While these services play a critical role in many of these areas, their effective employment, particularly in the information, cognitive, and diplomatic space, requires WONA. Domains and functions combine in their effort across various zones and conflict and competition as depicted to the right, where players are mix of military and non-military entities. Moving on to section 2. MDO in some form or other has always existed and is not a new phenomenon. However, its formal articulation, as alluded by Chair, it was by the United States in 2015 and articulated through a doctrine in 2018. And this brought the renewed doctrinal and academic traction globally. The concept was primarily delivered to counter Russia and China and likewise. However, it has not taken off as desired in this doctrine. Without being constrained by the US construct, MDO remains conceptually incomplete unless expanded into a synergized multi-domain, multi-level warfare framework to be truly future-ready in our context. It may therefore be redefined as MDO-ML or MDML. The subsequent argument of mind are derived from this very hypothesis. Effective adoption of MDML demands an Indianized doctrinal reorientation enabled through balanced transformation across 4 foundational pillars. Independent ops and tech approach must convert into tech-infused operational capability, training in HR, doctrine, and the cognitive, as depicted. The essence of MDML warfare lies in the convergence and not jointness alone. Such convergence can be built by adopt and adapting the best practices, such as IAF's Command Air Tasking and Strike Planning for Aerial Warfare, CATSPA framework. Creating analogous Army and Navy planning cells, such as Command Air Navy Tasking and Strike Planning for Joint Warfare, will be beneficial. These cells can plan and execute inter-service wargaming quadrimestrally to proactively mitigate friction, duplication, conflict, and casualties during execution of MDML warfare. Rather than reinventing structures, leveraging time-tested mechanisms from each services as best practices can strengthen joint operational capability. The IAF evolution from ADGIS to ISCCS has already transformed the orchestration of air operations. Such systems should not remain service silos, but evolve in what I call as silo of excellence, enabling plug-and-play convergence by other services to achieve integrated MDML warfare through a common all-domain operational picture. Though these services may have their procurement wish list, a basic yet extremely effective template could be derived from simple detection, identification, interception, and destruction template aligned with sensor-to-shooter loop, as everything in warfare is practically subsumed under this broad model. MDML warfare with net-centric capability is an inevitable necessity, with air and space domain being common to all other domains. This scenario requires identifying and acquiring the assets, systems, architectures necessary to deliver D2D or S2S at scale to build up the operational capacity. Indicated image provides a pictorial representation of the likely key assets that require central procurement. The effective MDML warfare requires a mandatory convergence of the communication grid and voice data video architecture for inter-domain communication. However, this image illustrates the current practical status of services in C2 capability. Globally, it has risen from analog C2 to digital C7 ISR and slowly graduating to quantum and AI embedded into it. While India aspires to become C5 ISR, services have yet not been able to bridge gap amongst themselves, which remains the biggest roadblock in the operational construct of MDO. Doctrinal tenets on air defense operations have been influenced by competing perspectives to claim ownership, causing uncertainty and chaos to the extent of challenging the Union War Book. To compound this tyranny, the rapid expansion of US and counter-US system and self-designated airspace ownership at extremely low-level, tactical level have increased airspace deconfliction, jamming, and fratricide hazard. This scenario requires a formal drone airspace management cell in the counter-US grid with multiple units from the services and civil agencies for coordinated and, most importantly, disciplined operations on the lines of Civil Defense Control Center. Existing efforts at the staff college and higher command levels for wargaming and simulation require a refreshed perspective and periodic updates to remain relevant amidst rapid technological change and an increasingly complex threat environment. The rest I leave to the next speaker to elaborate. Moving on to the second and third pillar, ladies and gentlemen, training, HR, and doctrine are deeply interrelated. Much like the fusion of operations and technology, these elements must also be fully enmeshed to enable meaningful MDML warfare, particularly with respect to the emerging domains and functions. It is paradoxical that the organization wants to be highly competitive and future-ready force. However, most of its newer domains and functions are staffed by individuals who are otherwise deemed unsuitable for the mainstream roles. Net result is that these workforces either don't deliver as desired, or when they bring credibility to the domains and functions, there is no career progression for them. Therefore, a fresh look is necessary to realign organizational needs with human aspiration, as this dichotomy will not achieve the organizational objective. This dilemma is not a peripheral issue. It is a core HR challenge that demands a closed-door, open-minded, realistic, and empathetic deliberations. Of late, there has been a race for MOU with civil agencies and academia by these services. While comprehensive data is not publicly available, the number of active MOUs are likely substantial. Whether these interactions result in quantifiable and qualitative institutional results that go beyond personal gains needs examination. To address this, a committed, impartial, apartisan Indian National Defense University is desperately needed to plan, execute, and simplify critical military requirements at the strategic and operational level, along with offering a layered PAB to the services. There has been a push for techno-commander idea, which is directionally correct, but MDML warfare will ultimately be delivered by the combatants at the cutting edge. So the tech competence has to be built bottom-up and not driven top-down through rhetoric. We need to urgently relook at the induction, training, and skill development to shape a true techno-combatant. The idea of centralized command, distributed control, and decentralized execution is not new. It has been articulated repeatedly in our doctrines and discussions and is a sound operational philosophy. But despite that, it hasn't been fully internalized, institutionalized, or consistently practiced across services, and often gets diluted under the under-command mindset. Another key issue is our deeply ingrained service-centric mindset. It is hard to change and undermine joint warfighting and doctrinal growth. It further gets diluted by repeating shallow or incorrect lessons and perceived indoctrination with no professional justification. For example, calling Air Force an air arm even in 2025 or using vague terms just to claim relevance only creates confusion, increases the risk of fratricide, and leads to battle space anarchy. Similarly, fancy terms like non-contact warfare sounds impressive, but need proper understanding because air power engages a target through electronic means well before visual contact. The idea of unified air defense is also often misunderstood. Please remember, air defense has always been unified in principle. What we really need is a proper integration for seamless air control and reporting system, adhering to the principle of unity of command. Procedural non-compliance cannot be used as a justification for doctrinal reinvention. For MDML warfare to function, it requires a serious brainstorming behind closed doors, otherwise it will remain merely aspirational and potentially detrimental. We will all have to fundamentally understand and appreciate that joint military warfare cannot be undertaken on varied perception. For successful warfare, 6 is 6 and 9 will remain 9. Future and even current warfare is being shaped by invisible domains that create visible effect on the ground, requiring training and doctrine to internalize invisibility and verticality as core constructs. Air, space, and subsurface operation will increasingly shape outcomes, while land and sea domains will primarily serve territorial control and defense. Recognizing and institutionalizing this shift early is critical for effective MDML warfare. Ops Sindoor validates the strategic shift from visible to invisible domains of battle space, as can be gleaned from the visual effects on ground, where information, invisibility, and precision mattered more than physical occupation. Since independence, the services have largely planned and fought wars through service-centric approaches. In modern warfare, such mindset must, so I'll just take 1 minute, sir. Such mindset must converge to enable MDML warfare. The most critical requirement is a genuine transformation of mindset. Despite the defense reform in jointness post-Kargil review in 2000 and 5 years since creation of DMA in 2019, progress on jointness has been limited. The primary reason is not operational or administrative, but rather a lack of mindset transformation. Cognitive change is therefore fundamental to MDML warfare, as true convergence depends more on mindset and trust than on organizational structures alone. There is a need for a dedicated, neutral, progressive, new thinking, Navchintan Samvad, free from service biases as a prerequisite for achieving meaningful cross-domain jointness and true integration. Lastly, services have a peculiar template for drawing implementation strategies with short, mid, and long-term goals spread over decades. To my mind, unfortunately, today, neither the IAF nor the Army and the Navy can afford to follow this template, especially for an unforeseeable long-term goals, keeping our inventories in mind. Services cannot wait for the target of 2047 to be fully transformed and as envisioned in the Defense Vision 2047 released on 10th March. We will have to seriously ingrain in our operational planning and procurement guideline to set the target of Mission 2032 as a landmark deadline aligned with the centenary year of the IAF. 7 years is enough to transform, provided we switch throttle of mindset to the max power. So to sum up, ladies and gentlemen, each issues I have touched upon deserves a deeper dialogue and discussion for Samvad se Samadhan. And keeping the time constant, I have kept the analysis as broad as possible, and these are the key policy recommendations for your recap. With that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much, Group Captain S.P. Singh. You all will agree that Group Captain S.P. Singh has presented a well-researched service paper on doctrinal nuances of MDO, especially the doctrine of convergence. He has also introduced a few interesting but debatable aspects related to space, cognitive, and the cyber not being a means of war fighting, it's a warfare. And I have not read ever anywhere the introduction of subsurface domain. If you go to the literature aspects and read about the maritime domain includes the medium above, medium under, including over the sea and the littorals. There is an overlap between land, air, and in the littorals. So this understanding has to be there. With this, may I now request the next speaker, Commander Rushwan Razak, to present on the topic wargaming and simulation for MDO. Thank you.
Good morning, distinguished dignitaries, respected colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. In the next 20 minutes, I will present my paper on simulation and wargaming infrastructure for multi-domain operations. The paper draws and builds upon the ideas from open source international research papers, emerging military applications, and Indian Navy's ongoing work in this domain. In an era of escalating geopolitical tensions along India's extensive borders, from our land frontiers to the expansive Indian Ocean region, modern warfare demands far more than conventional military strength. It requires the orchestration of synchronized effects across land, sea, air, space, cyber, and the cognitive domain. Central to multi-domain operations is decision superiority, the capacity to perceive, decide, and execute with greater agility and unity than the adversary, as the PLA integrates artificial intelligence into its operational paradigms and the United States advances deep technology into conflict zones and to its synthetic training environment, our defense forces face an imperative to bridge emerging cognitive gaps. Traditional wargaming, while essential for doctrinal development and professional education, is inadequate to capture the intricacies of contemporary conflicts, which involves network surveillance, precision strikes, disrupted supply chains, hybrid threats, and pervasive information operations. The nature of these challenges can be distilled into 5 critical areas: compressed decision cycles that demand faster responses, cross-domain engagements where action in one domain ripple across others, resilient logistics under contested conditions, integrated ISR for a coherent operational picture, and cognitive adaptability amid ambiguity. These dynamics call for interoperable, scalable, and simulation frameworks that enable rigorous analysis and rehearsals without the exorbitant cost, risk, or logistic demands of live exercises. This paper advocates for Indian Defence Forces development of a nationally scalable, live, virtual, constructive simulation ecosystem underpinned by 3 pillars: a federated architecture for interoperability, a governed data fabric for institutional knowledge, and a bounded AI augmentation for enhanced decision-making. This infrastructure will bolster joint operational readiness, foster doctrinal innovation, and critically uphold human command authority at every stage. Building on indigenous technology integration and inter-services collaboration, it positions simulation as a force multiplier for our armed forces. At the heart of this framework lies a modular 4-layer reference architecture designed for a unique operational context. At the base, layer 1, the LVC layer, runs the synthetic battle. AI-driven enemy contacts, engagements, injects, and multi-agent scenarios within the unified synthetic battle space are generated here. Layer 2, the federation layer, connects the 3 services. It uses high-level architecture and distributed interactive simulations, protocols, and standards. It links Army, Navy, Air Force simulators, enabling real-time data exchange without compromising service autonomy. Layer 3, the national data fabric, governs, stores, and learns from data. It manages version scenarios, databases, terrain models, event logs, and AI outputs, supporting traceable after-action reviews and institutional memory. Layer 4, the AI services layer, advises the commander. It provides modular tools like course of action generation, adversary modeling, logistic optimization, and doctrinal insights. It is bounded by transparency and auditability. And most importantly, AI augmentation is never planned to replace command authority. A staged approach for AI inclusion is essential for building calibrated trust. This framework safeguards human dominance while progressively leveraging AI for efficiency. Phase 1, which is ongoing, is the baseline, human versus human. Phase 2, targeted by end of 2027, introduces AI assistance to human players. Phase 3, by end 2028, moves to supervised human versus AI confrontations. And Phase 4, by 2030, enables experimental AI versus AI simulations where humans analyze the outcome of the war games played out by AI agents at speeds unimaginable by human players. We now examine each of the 4 LVC architecture layers in detail, beginning with layer 1, the LVC construct. The foundational LVC layer focuses on efficient simulation of 3 independent segments enabled with AI modules. This slide will illustrate the LVC construct in the maritime domain, fusing all 3 proposed segments into one realistic battle space. Concepts shown are equally applicable for all the 3 services. In the live element, a small number of real ships, submarines, and aircraft operate at sea with their actual radars and sensors switched on. This live layer is essential as real sea state, fatigue, and electromagnetic environment cannot be perfectly replicated in simulators. Perhaps only 4 to 5 ships actually sail, and the remainder train from harbor-based simulators. In the virtual segment, crews train in high-fidelity shore-based simulators from maritime warfare centers, maritime operations centers, and naval war college, and also from ships' combat management systems in simulation mode. All simulation environment would be modified to the live feed data from units at sea for realism. The constructive layer is a unique proposal. Instead of human players simulating as Red Force, AI modules generate adaptive adversaries, inject threats directly into the combat management system of the naval units and maritime war game centers. The critical advantage would be that every single Blue Force unit is available to the Blue Force commander for training and operational rehearsal. And no blue assets are diverted to play the adversary. This is what enables us to train the way we fight and fight the way we train. A similar LVC construct is recommended for the Indian Army and Indian Air Force as well. The proposed architecture is service agnostic by design and can be easily adapted for individual services' unique operating environment. An important distinction must be drawn with respect to normal wargame systems. LVC simulation training is fundamentally different from current system-based or multiplayer wargaming. Wargaming software runs purely on a computer with no real assets moving, whereas the proposed LVC construct incorporates live deployments, full utilization of blue assets as per actual orbit, and AI-driven constructive segment for red and neutral forces. The recommended phases of development are as shown. In the initial phase, all units may net into the system from harbor, using shore-based simulators from establishment and from ships' combat management systems. In phase 2, limited units deployed at sea connect into the simulation network along with other units and wargame centers in harbor. This phase would require a robust satellite data link for seamless connection with units at sea. In phase 3, the system achieves additional capability to handle the entire Blue Force and assets at sea and harbor, a truly persistent, scalable training environment. This construct offers compelling operational advantages. I will elaborate further using a maritime scenario where a naval task group is deployed to deal with a contingency. The deployed units, whilst on transit, can wargame the op line with headquarters support for exact scenario as they approach their area of operations. Also, both ships at sea and alongside harbor can simultaneously simulate to any other area of operations while continuing with their patrol duties or ongoing tasks. We now move to layer 2, the federation layer. This is the foundational technical backbone of any true LVC system. Federation connects independent systems via common standards, enabling data sharing without centralization. Each service retains its own systems and autonomy. However, through federated protocol, they can work together seamlessly in a shared synthetic battle space and transform separate service simulators into unified training capability. Without this layer, we only have decentralized systems with no standard data format, no guaranteed interoperability, and no joint operation reliability. This slide illustrates the federated architecture in practice. In the future, the proposed National Wargaming and Data Center (NWDC) planned to be set up under the aegis of Future Operations and Analysis Group at HQ IDS is recommended be designed ground up with LVC architecture for seamless connection with all other services. Layer 3 is a national data fabric. The proposed concept is built over Indian Navy's ongoing development of Operational Data Framework project, which ingests and stores large volumes of heterogeneous data from multiple sources in their original form. With time, any data lake will progress into a data lakehouse concept, making data governed, queryable, reliable, and directly usable for analytics and decision support. However, the proposed data fabric architecture represents a fundamental shift from the traditional approach. Instead of multiple siloed databases connected through point-to-point APIs with no common metadata, data fabric approach brings all data into one common environment. This is not just a storage system. It is an intelligent, operationally aware data environment needed for LVC AI layer residing above it. The proposed AI services layer is where the bounded AI augmentation advises the commander, operating outside the simulation, not within it. A critical distinction is that Layer 1 LVC AI module acts inside the synthetic battle space and generates a game solution, whereas the Layer 4 AI module advises outside it and helps the commander solve it. Some of the proposed use cases for Layer 4 is as flashed. During testing, all Layer 4 tools may be advisory in nature, but the commander may be given option for AI autonomy. Whilst AI promises enhanced decision speed, realism, and efficiency, its integration must be carefully managed to avoid undermining human judgment, doctrinal integrity, and operational trustworthiness. I will now address the 4 critical risks and their mitigation strategies. The first risk is AI autonomy and over-reliance. Unbounded or over-automated AI risks eroding commanders' cognitive skills through automation bias, where users delay decisions excessively for machine outputs. This leads to diminished situational awareness, brittleness in novel scenarios, and the danger of unintended escalation. The mitigation is clear. Bounded AI roles with mandatory human veto authority at all critical points. Phased human to AI progression for calibrated trust building, mandatory confirmation points, and continuous training on AI guardrails. Preserve mission command and adaptive thinking. The second risk is data integrity and bias. Inaccurate, biased, or unrepresentative training data, whether incomplete ORBAT, flawed terrain models, hallucinated adversary behavior, or corrupted lessons, can propagate systemic errors and fundamentally compromise simulation credibility. The mitigation is a governed data fabric with authoritative baselines, version-controlled repositories, multi-source bias audits, and human-in-the-loop validation at every stage. The third risk is inter-service fragmentation. Without coordinated standards, service-specific simulators and AI tools risk remaining isolated with incompatible data formats, no cross-domain synchronization, and weakened jointness. This directly undermines the joint proficiency essential for theater commands. The mitigation lies in the federated architecture itself. HLA and DIS compliance may be enforced on all wargame systems operated by the 3 services. A tri-services steering group under the National Wargame and Data Center is recommended for implementation and overseeing joint systems-based wargame exercises. The fourth risk is institutional trust and ethics. Opaque AI outputs, lack of auditability, bias amplification, and escalation tendencies can erode confidence among commanders and planners, undermining the legitimacy of the entire system. The mitigation centers on transparency and auditability, end-to-end logging of every AI outputs, red team audits of AI modules, rules of engagement guardrails enforced at every level, and independent validation panels. My key proposals for implementation and adoption across the defense forces are as follows. First, it is proposed that HQIDS establish a tri-service steering group and establish a joint LVC architecture within the next 12 months. Without a clear integration architecture, interoperability will remain aspirational. Second, the proposed National Wargaming and Data Center NWDC under the aegis of Future Operations and Analysis Group at HQIDS acts as a central hub for joint LVC simulation, federated data governance, and AI-augmented wargaming architecture. Each individual services may set up respective AI wargaming labs with the purpose of feeding NWDC with the developed and matured service-specific, ethical, and explainable AI models. Third, build a national scenario repository of at least 15 validated and version-controlled scenarios within 24 months as a shared tri-service resource for operational and strategic wargaming. Fourth, pilot narrow AI use cases, beginning with the course of action generation, red cell modeling, and after-action report generation, culminating in the first human versus human-assisted AI joint wargame within 2 years. Fifth, adopt a governed data fabric architecture as a national standard for wargaming data management, replacing the current siloed point-to-point integration approach. Sixth, mandate HLA and DS compliance for all new service-level simulation acquisitions. Interoperability must be built in by design and not retrofitted to enable seamless federation across all 3 services. Implement AI-driven constructive layer capabilities across all 3 services to generate adaptive red force behavior, freeing all blue forces for realistic training, enabling our forces to truly train the way they fight. And lastly, and the most neglected, invest in in-house service expertise by training a dedicated cadre of AI and data science qualified officers specifically for wargaming within the next 5 years. Borrowed cutting-edge technology without in-house trained manpower will not be a sustainable model. These proposals are structured to deliver early credibility through narrow pilot projects, scale progressively through federation and governance, and ultimately position Indian Defense Forces as a leader in simulation and wargaming domain. I would like to end my talk with the old proverb: the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. On similar lines, I would like to state that the best time to set up AI wargaming labs and integrate all service gaming systems was 10 years ago. The next best time is now. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you, Rashwan. With a sound technical background, you have well attempted to sell the idea of creation of a scalable, live, virtual, constructive simulation ecosystem for joint ops scenario involving the latest advanced techniques. The proposal for creation of a national wargaming and data center under Future Ops Analysis Group merits examination. Thank you. And now may I request Colonel Ankush Goyal to present his talk.
Chair, Chief of the Defense Staff, former chiefs, senior officers, distinguished colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. It is truly a matter of great honor and privilege for me to be able to address this august gathering. The subject before us is not abstract theory. It is the requirement of our security environment. We are operating in a world where the lines between war and peace, military and civilian, combatant and non-combatant, are increasingly indistinct, where war and peace have started to look suspiciously alike. During my talk, I would initially discuss briefly the issues which face us in the contemporary environment, followed by some key attributes of MDO. I would then deliberate over some aspects of domains of MDO, followed by some contradictions to set the ground for my recommendations, about which I would talk in detail. Today, traditional binaries between war and peace have eroded. Hybrid threats, cyber operations, information campaigns, and dual-use infrastructure have created a persistent gray zone. For India, a large, diverse, rapidly modernizing democracy, success in this environment depends on institutionalized military-civil fusion and robust inter- as well as intra-agency collaboration. India's strategic environment is complex. Our vast population, layered governance, where state governments and central governments may have different priorities, external pressures, create both opportunities and vulnerabilities in multi-domain competition. Effective national response requires mechanisms that act swiftly, legally, and with political legitimacy. This calls for structural reforms, doctrinal clarity, capability development, and a massive cultural change to build a unified national response. To put things in perspective, multi-domain operations are not new, and right from Mahabharata to Shivaji, Indians have been long adept at MDO. The terminology has evolved from no war, no peace to grey zone warfare to multi-domain operations, but the essence remains: pursuit of strategic advantage. Historically, the armed forces carried this responsibility. Today, each discipline must secure its own domain, operate within the domain, and be prepared to disrupt the adversary's domain, calibrated undeniably by a national level organization. For example, a specialist of an industrial control system should have the capability to trigger an industrial shutdown, or a hydrology specialist should be able to control river flows. The current geopolitical environment has deepened what may be called as the fog of peace. Multi-domain operations now span the full spectrum of conflict, almost converging the full color palette through a prism into a white continuum, omnipresent, protracted, and uncertain. Without going into many details, I would now highlight 3 of the 6 very key attributes, those highlighted in blue on the slide, of modern competition across multiple domains. MDO is very carefully calibrated on the escalation metrics. Aggressors calibrate and modulate intensity without crossing red lines, or deliberately cross red lines to elicit a strategic response. For example, in the Israeli music festival or at Pahalgam, red lines were crossed deliberately to provoke a reaction. It is also pertinent to note that while grey zone operations are often considered instruments of weaker actors, stronger adversaries also employ them effectively to ensure coercive deterrence through show of strength operations in a non-kinetic domain. In addition, grey zone activities may not always remain below the threshold of war. If belligerents possess the capability, such actions can escalate into catastrophic conflict. This reiterates the need for all agencies to recognize that actions in any domains may escalate, and that civilian institutions should be prepared to become instruments of force in active hostilities. Multi-domain operations are cumulative and simultaneous, often overwhelming states with bureaucratic inertia. Activities across multiple domains saddle the decision maker by their effects, who is then unable to take a decision and is generally only reacting. The Vietnam War demonstrated how pressures from families and public opinion shape national decision making. This is the operations in multiple domains at work, where security, politics, and society intersect through cognitive domain. The key point to note here is, if responses are reactive and delayed, the initiative is already lost. Effective interagency coordination reduces friction and accelerates decision cycles. A word about how expansion of conflict spectrum has blurred distinctions between military and civilian targets. Terrorists embed within civilian population. Cyber attackers exploit dual-use infrastructure, and economic and cyber tools are weaponized by both state and non-state actors. However, to counter these actors, international humanitarian law requires use of proportional force, abiding by which proudly distinguishes the Indian armed forces in the world across all spectrums of conflict. Technology has blurred distinction between tactical, operational, and strategic levels. A tactical drone strike can have strategic consequences, and a single cyber intrusion can ripple across national security. Success in MDO rests on technological advancement. I would even go further to say that the information domain is the one which binds all other domains together. It can also be said easily that our network is our net worth. Today, I can proudly say that through the Network for Spectrum project, the tri-services are on the threshold of being bound together in a common thread of jointmanship and convergence. Each day, new domains are added as new battlegrounds, which will have their own doctrines to engage. Merely the consideration of a number of more potential domains for engagement places a country at an advantage over the adversary. I must confess that progress to converge capabilities for MDO is not easy, and the system is fraught with a complex maze of contradictions. I would like to highlight some contradictions before I recommend a few initiatives. While MDO thrives on indirect activities which can avoid direct attribution, militaries, on the other hand, excel at direct action. Democracies, by design, diffuse authority to deliberately avoid concentrating power. This strengthens legitimacy, but complicates integration to generate comprehensive national strength. Operations across multiple domains necessitate a whole-of-government approach with selfless disregard to tough issues. Within the security ecosystem, institutions like the NSCS and Headquarter IDS exist, but ministries and departments still tend to operate in silos. Intelligence agencies tend to withhold data, and absence of unified command probably delays responses. Inter-domain battles and diffuse control tend to hinder cohesion. While 26/11 Mumbai attacks highlighted delays in coordination, Kashmir's present integrated mechanism offers a model for replication nationwide. Another point to note here is that formerly, security models involved fewer agencies. Today, internal and external security environments have blurred, requiring synchronization under a grand strategy. Therefore, coordination is not optional. It is the foundation of resilience. I strongly believe that multi-domain operations are continuous operations against a nation, a society, a culture, and its people, requiring unified approach through synergy between all national agencies and organizations. I would deliberate over the recommendations under three broad heads as shown. Firstly, the reforms required at leadership and organizational levels. Further, I will cover the organizational recommendations under the heads given on the slide. While the paper had been written earlier, recent developments in Middle East confirm to some suppositions. I propose national theaterization, with command and control structure at the national level streamlined under a Ministry of National Security, which can optimize available resources rather than compete with each other by integrating defense, home, external affairs, industry resources, and intelligence, by converging reporting channels, ensuring safeguards, and embedding specialists in its fold. It may be an improvement over the existing NSCS or the National Council, as suggested yesterday by Admiral Sameer Saxena, by having stronger command and control linkages. At the military level, the Office of the Chief of Defense Staff may be empowered further with operational authority over all operational commands. Strengthened verticals can exist at CDS's office for specific fronts or domains to enable jointness, Atmanirbharta, and integration. Such structures would ensure mechanisms that ensure swift and politically legitimate actions during operations. Next, at the regional levels, it is recommended to extrapolate national coordination structures with command and control linkages, including military, civilian administration, police, border guarding forces, intelligence, and relevant ministries for each strategic region with clear mandates and authorities. The agencies must jointly coordinate infrastructure development, civilian administration, and security postures. During my command tenure in Eastern Ladakh, I realized that the district administration, police, and local civil society can be the first responders to many grey zone pressures and must be integrated into the MDO plans. As was mentioned by the Chief of Army Staff himself yesterday, I recommend to conduct long duration, realistic exercises simulating all possible grey zone scenarios with multiple agencies and ministries. A country is known to have conducted these kind of exercises over years and decades, every time losing to the adversary in the exercise, before finally developing a joint and integrated workable plan. At the formation level, MDO war game must be the main war game, rather than being an adjunct to it, with residual combat potential calculated for each MDO action. Intelligence is equally relevant to MDO, and hence there is a requirement to create joint intelligence fusion centers with clear command linkages that integrate civilian, military, and technical intelligence. Union War Book is required to be developed, mapping realistic escalation ladders across diplomatic, economic, informational, legal, and military domains. Its effectiveness should be exercised in multi-agency war games and the document progressively refined. Next, the leaders must think across domains, prioritize national interest over institutional turf, and promotions must reward collaborative ability. Service parity and inter-se equivalence between different services and organizations would also encourage collaborative decision-making. I would also like to say that artificial differences, which create disparities between status of officers of different cadre vis-a-vis years of service, are one of the biggest impediments to joint collaborative working. So I was in 11th standard in 1999 when a country issued a 50-year vision document for 2049. I was aware of the Indian 5-year plan program, and in my mind then, I remember having disregarded the foreign document as mere propaganda. But the country had not just planned for 50 years hence, but as history would prove, it surpassed its own set timelines. The country, being aware that in 2048, the treaty system that prevents development of Antarctica will expire, is already working towards it. It is probably in our national character to take a short view of time, probably limited to the duration tenanted by an individual at an office, thereby creating a lack of continuity in thought and action. There is a requirement to institutionalize long-term continuity beyond individual tenures to avoid personality-driven shifts. For success in MDO, it is required to present unified deterrent posture through coordinated messaging, economic measures, legal actions, and calibrated military responses to shape perceptions to own advantage. The narrative needs to be jointly conceptualized by highest civilian and military authorities through high degree of collaboration. During Operation Sindoor, multiple national level activities were coordinated, right from military action to Indus Water Treaty in perfect synchronization. Coming on to my next set of recommendations about capability development, which will be covered under 3 heads as shown. I strongly believe that most MDO activities are backed by credible military presence, poised for escalation if required. Otherwise, how can some actors get away with grey zone activities while some attract punitive response? Conventional military capability is the bedrock for any activity in MDO, as the aggressor should always be prepared for a conventional military retaliation. India demonstrated this adequately during Operation Sindoor. Appropriate conventional military capability to keep a force in being needs to be built as a deterrent, keeping the overall end state as well as escalation possibility in perspective. Strategic advantage may also be accrued through well-orchestrated, asymmetric, cross-sectoral activities by expanding the domains of MDO. We have seen how blocking sea lines of communication has created a worldwide strategic impact, much more than waves of missile fires. In addition, critical capabilities like telecommunications Cloud services, satellite imagery, logistics are developed primarily by the private sector, driven by their countries which are global leaders in defense technological innovation, driven by their robust military-civil collaboration, commercialize even military innovations. The innovations are applied in the civilian sector, driving economic growth while strengthening national security. My third set of recommendations are about judicious resource optimization, which will be covered as shown. We need to develop dual-use infrastructure, highways as runways, tunnels as shelters, resilient communication, and distributed supply chain. Such infrastructure should be developed quickly by applying national will, bypassing bureaucratic hurdles, and inviting private firms. Further, we need to extend IT and communication right up to the forward areas to expand the IT advantage to the forward edge. In addition, urban resilience programs to prevent spread of disinformation, protect utilities and public services, and improve social cohesion can become pivotal for rear area security. Maritime competition includes fishing disputes, commercial denial strategies, and the use of private maritime actors to assert influence. Indian Navy, Indian Coast Guard, Customs, Fisheries Departments, and Commerce Ministries must synchronize patrols, enforcements, and diplomatic engagements to diversify supply chains, protect critical infrastructure, and deploy targeted economic countermeasures. Blurring of military targets and rise of multi-domain competition represent a strategic reality that will shape India's security environment for decades. In the emerging security paradigm, multi-level and multi-dimensional wargaming is vital. MDO may be an end in itself or a means within a nation's grand strategy. History teaches us that nations which plan in decades prevail. Those that plan in tenures falter. A healthy military-civil relationship is essential and demands a paradigm shift in inter- and intra-agency collaboration through institutional reforms, trust building, and integrated governance. Thus, India will be better positioned to deter aggression, manage crises, and shape a regional order in an era where the lines between war and peace are deliberately blurred. The task before us is to institutionalize continuity, coherence, and collaboration so that India not only navigates the gray zone, but shapes it to her advantage. In the end, I would just like to thank the audience and organizers for having given me a chance to express my views at this prestigious forum. Thank you. Tivra Chaukas. Jai Hind.
May I compliment you, Ankush, for presenting a vibrant and thought-provoking study on furtherance of MDO concept and to achieve civil-military fusion towards addressing the national security interests. I must also acknowledge that you have succinctly highlighted the complex maze of contradictions, mainly with a focused impetus on synergy, on achieving synergy between all the national agencies. Sir, we have about 14 minutes. If we could yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have time till 10:30, so 14 minutes, sir. Still 1030, sir. Yes. So before the house is open for Q&A, the rules of the games remains unchanged. The individual asking the question may identify itself, short, brief question, and one question at a time. And we will take three in a round. We'll take 3 questions, and you may identify the speaker to whom the question is addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm Major General Abhinay. My question is to Group ESP. It was a great thought-provoking presentation, and the issue of domains, when you cover, I agree with you, subsurface would become a domain and Chinese will be the first to go there, but not including the cyber and space and electromagnetic spectrum also as a domain. Probably, I just wanted to give a comment on that. The fact is we live in an imperfect world. In a utopian construct, it would work the way you have articulated. The functional end state is more important. But this was tried, and probably the Chinese failed when they set up the strategic support force. They found that the domains needed to be given that additional impetus, and therefore now they've made cyber, space, and electromagnetic spectrum, which they call the ISF, as 3 different domains. And that is what the Americans have also gone. I think to give the specialization, the due, the domains need to be constructed. So that is one point which I wanted to make. My question is, sir, I'll just take 2-3 minutes. My other point which I wanted to highlight is that from theoretical concepts, we need to move to organizational force. And that is what the MDO 2028 articulates when it comes to the USA. And going towards that, they have created the organizational force of the multi-domain effect task force, effect battalions, and effect platoons. Because at functional level, you require organization which will be able to play the MDO. So from theory, we need to go down. And one point for Ankush. Ankush, if you could think about in the private-public partnership, the Americans have gone in for an Amazon service for procurement. In MDO yesterday also it was discussed, when we are looking for software, we can't go in for the same procurement cycle. So probably we also need to tie up and have an Amazon kind of a platform available. And the Americans have actually gone with the Amazon only web services. So we too probably would need that. Thank you.
So this topic itself is 2 questions in the same. I will just address the domain parts before I hand over to Swayam. There are 6 domains. The domains is something which the space, it's a space where you want to influence. Yesterday also this discussion happened on the nuclear aspect, the society, the EM dimensions. You look at what these effects affect this space in which you are looking at. If a nuclear domain is there, that is influencing the cognitive domain. If it is an EM, this thing is addressing the physical aspect. So domains are where you influence the space. That is important. SP, for you.
So I'll try to answer in a very simple manner, sir. A domain, if we analyze, sir, there are two issues to it. One, we take the literal meaning of domain, which could be in the social science domain. Anything is a domain, which is the area of influence. But as a warfare practitioner, when we are talking about domain, we should not be obsessed with this word, saying that every aspect is a domain. Domain, as I described in my presentation, that there has to be some definition to it. Because the biggest problem is that if we do not adhere to a definition and start calling everything a domain, every service, every corps, every branch, every tentacle of warfighter would like themselves to be called as a domain. So idea, whatever I presented, is that we need to define boundaries and restrict to it. Second is about the organizational force. Very aptly brought out, sir. The concept of MDO, which was initiated by US in 2015 and first time written through a doctrine, that was by US Army countering Russia and China in an expeditionary role, and there they want to have everything off. Somehow our understanding of domain is that I want to do everything right from subsurface to space, which I cannot as an individual service. I have to restrict to my core competencies and be into that. I should not step to other domains. So there is no point of creating a domain force. Whereas what I want to create is that as a air warrior practitioner, do I have adequate understanding on the land forces operations and the sea operations and subsea operations? If as a warfare air power practitioner, air power commander, if I appreciate that and undertake the operations, that is the multi-domain operations. It is not that I step into your shoes and you step into mine, sir. That is my understanding of it, sir.
So your aspect regarding the public-private partnership is absolutely most agreeable, sir. Even the public sector and the private sector both need to step up their game so that we can really constitute a whole of nation approach. That point is very well taken, sir. We need to move towards it. A very quick point, sir, I would like to make regarding the domains as well. In my view, I believe that more the number of domains, more the advantage it is. Of course, one should not be stepping onto toes, etc. A simple analogy I will give is a cricket team which only understands batting and bowling as domains versus another team which considers fielding also as a domain. So it will have a specialization built into it and may perform better than the other team. So this is my point on this.
Shrikande, please.
Thank you. I am Shrikande, retired from the Navy. To Group Captain SP Singh, while I understand the symbolism of, say, 2047 for India or 2049 for China, a suggestion sort of keeps coming up, or a feeling keeps coming up that transformation also has a completion date or an achievement date, which probably is wrong because transformation is a continuous process. So we cannot say we want to transform by 2047 or something. Some small objectives can have, achievement dates, but transformation itself, I would suggest, is a rolling, is a constant thing. And a lot of studies have come out that, China will be transformatized by the PLA will transform itself or transformatize itself, to use an awkward term. But, some say 2027, 2035, 2049, etc. So I think there might be a trap here, which we should perhaps be careful about. Your views, please.
Sir, I totally agree, sir. I totally agree to this. Since my younger days, every 8th October presser, it always used to say that Indian Air Force is under transformation. And today in 2026, when we are defining the Defense Vision 2047, we are still saying that another 10 years is required for transformation. Transformation is an ongoing process. There cannot be a set deadline. But point here is that when do we want to excel? The vision, what is covered, obviously it is with the national ambition of Amrit Kal 2047, Viksit Bharat 2047. But point here is that we have to speed up with relation to our adversaries. Where every year, tomorrow Pakistan individual will be going to space, and shall we wait for 2047 for our military things to? No, we cannot. So that is my individual perception. I may be wrong in the overall thing, but we need to speed up. That's my take.
Morning, sir. My name is Group Captain Kelkar.
Just after this.
It's good to have different views. But the thing about domain, and I agree with the general here, SP, a domain is a space in which you can maneuver to create effects. So before 1957, space always existed. But it was not a domain as such because the Sputnik had not gone. You couldn't maneuver. Thereafter, you could maneuver and create effects, and hence space became a domain. So the point is, we have to be very clear, and I personally, can you maneuver in the electromagnetic spectrum? Can you do that in the cyber spectrum? And in the cognitive spectrum, you start influencing leaders by your steps and maneuver in the cognitive domain. And I think it's a domain. So I personally feel that cyber, electromagnetic spectrum, and cognitive are domains. And I don't think we should have as many domains as required. That would be trivializing it.
Sir, Group Captain Bahadur, please.
Sir, I am Group Captain Kelkar.
Kelkar, please, sorry.
I am from Air Force Academy, sir. My question will be very brief. In the concept of multi-domain operations, I perceive the civilian sector will play almost a part of 60-40. Will it be appropriate that we include the civilian representatives in the future run Samvads? Example could be Indian Railways, Civil Aviation, Central Armed Police Forces, Civil Defense.
Express your desired proposal, it will be examined as normal way.
Sir, point here.
Sir, just
Up here.
Yeah, please.
Sir, I'm Brigadier Praveen, presently attending the NDC, sir, from Garhwal Rifles. I started this process of examining role of artificial intelligence into training thanks to College of Defense Management. Went into examining how AI can train the armed forces better. Went into simulations and war games. That was in 2021. I was not aware of the tremendous work being done by Rizwak. From there, once we started getting feedback from the environment, and just getting on the environmental reality part after posing the question to Rizwak, the first set of feedbacks came in that we are trying to propose that we are trying to make chocolate cream soldiers, the status of training simulators in the army per se, wherein they are just kept for accounting purpose and not being used. Then came in a set of simulators like what is coming in from Zen. Simulators are good, but when somebody comes for the admin inspection, your backside gets exposed, as in what's actual training gets exposed to the environment. There are such challenges are there. Then somebody comes and challenges that DRDO comes up with some new set of simulations of wargaming software, and that is forced down upon us. These are the feedbacks from the environment or the environmental reality per se. When we actually start getting into a model, I'm an infantry officer, sir, 4-pointer from NDA. Once we start training or developing the models, question is, sir, the main point is, if we have to start training our models, sir, we need training data sets. Each of our war games, we discuss stuff, we record stuff, we delete stuff, we keep some stuff for posterity. Now, which of these particular data sets, which of these learnings are we going to preserve to train our data sets which Speaker 2 is planning to set up? I'm in complete agreement, we need it, that's need of the hour as of 10 years back. But what set of data sets are we going to preserve to train the future, and how the security is going to be ensured? That's a major point, sir.
Rashwan, you could cover also what we are looking at in the ODF, how we are setting up the data sets.
Yes, sir. Sir, when you look at data sets, it starts with data warehouse, where you have structured data, quality data there. But when you look at a data lake, what the Navy is trying to do is that all unstructured data, whatever format, it can just be dumped. And when you have data warehouse residing, automatically it'll give you the quality. But what I'm proposing is that from there, as you keep on dumping data, you don't have to worry. Just you have to populate data, have that architecture ready. So that is what we are lacking. And that is what, sir, I can say that BESI is doing a wonderful job for the Navy. They are coming up with something on ODF. So from there, what I am proposing is that we should have something on a data fabric structure where there's something on active metadata. Automatically, it will be able to understand the data. It has an intelligent layer on top of it. It is like all these different databases are connected through an intelligent system. So it automatically the problem get resolved, sir. So the main, as far as your question is concerned, from the paper, what I'm trying to propose is that we should have a federated layer in which your different architecture are able to connect to each other, even though you're autonomous. So that is what solves your problem, sir.
No, a small comeback, sir.
Just your genuine concern. DG Vessi is here, Admiral Pathania. You could interact with this thing, and genuine concern that could be addressed bilaterally. Sir, with your permission, Admiral Luthra sir would like to ask one, if we could allow one more.
Thank you. My brief question is related to the subject under discussion, that is doctrines, wargaming, and simulation. In both the federated model and the first model the layer that you indicated,
the doctrinal adaptation and training required for conducting multi-domain operations, we would now see how operational art can be redefined to address the demands of multi-domain operations, highlighting integration, interoperability, and decision superiority as the cornerstones for future military effectiveness. The chair for this session is Lieutenant General Anindya Sen Gupta, Param Vishish Seva Medal, Uttam Yudh Seva Medal, Ati Vishish Seva Medal, Yudh Seva Medal, General Officer Commanding in Chief, Central Command. Lieutenant General Anindya Sen Gupta has been a directing staff at Defense Services Staff College and a military observer in Congo. He has held key appointments like Director Force Structuring at Strategic Planning Directorate, Brigadier Staff Duties at Staff Duties Directorate, Additional Director General at Complaint Advisory Board in the Chief of the Army Staff Secretariat, and Director General Strategic Planning. May I now request the speakers for this session to occupy your seats on the stage. The first speaker of this session is Wing Commander Abhishek Tripathi, who has submitted his paper on reimagining AWPART for MDO. Wing Commander Tripathi is an aeronautical engineer and is posted as instructor at Air Force Technical College. He would be covering his talk on joint planning for MDO. The second speaker, Air Commodore MPS Virk, has submitted his paper on multi-domain ISR integration for interoperable command and control and decision making. Air Commodore MPS Virk is an aeronautical engineer and is presently serving as Principal Director Systems with the IAF project team at the Aeronautical Development Agency. He will be covering his talk on ISR integration for information superiority in MDO. The last speaker for the session is Captain R.S. Savan, who has submitted his paper on force design options for MDO. Captain Savan is a specialist in navigation and aircraft direction and is currently a senior fellow at the National Maritime Foundation, New Delhi. He would be covering his talk on force development for MDO, current capabilities, and future requirements. May I now request the chair to take over for further proceedings of this session.
Thank you. May we commence, sir? This session is actually a follow-on of the talk given yesterday by the Army Commander Artrak on the same subject. As we go ahead in this session, rather before we go ahead, you would realize that to make this purple, this chair, this setting of the chairs purple, I have been put here, and I would like to take on from there and also draw on some experiences I've had in staff college to give out how we should reimagine op art from a perspective of land and grey zone. This slide has been seen by all of us many a time. What we realize is that this slide is related to conventional operations. In yesterday's talk, it was very clearly brought out, giving out the lessons of epic fury, that shaping, maintaining shock, and sustaining the various phases of battle in a multi-domain environment was carried out in a currently claimed to be successful manner by US and Israel. And in this space and cyber, EW and UAVs did play a major role and a defining role too. However, as you go back and imagine operational art, we come to the concept of centers of gravity. The centers of gravity, which are also related to the strategic or the operational end states, have they been achieved in this war, which is still ongoing, albeit a pause? Similarly, is the attack on critical centers of gravity always enough for the enemy to capitulate? We take our minds back to Ukraine and Russia, the conflict which is ongoing there too. Ukraine has been holding on and has its center of gravity actually been made vulnerable. It's still, the jury is out on that. So how can battles of today have a defined, formalized planning process in this realm of multi-domain? And in all this, do we practice operational art with those 9 tenets, which will be brought out by Wing Commander Tripathi in great detail, be applicable, and in what way? And in near-peer contests, which is what we as a country are looking at, how will it work out? And the complexity grows because other than the op art tenets, and the multi-domain scenario, we also have to deal with a constant, always present gray zone, which is on our LC, on our LAC, maritime domain, at times the air, and also disturbed areas in our hinterland. Along with that comes the challenges of integrating the forces and having a whole of nation approach to deal with while there is no conflict on. Therefore, this defining of a center of gravity in a multi-domain environment is what becomes more complex for us. We have to define it while the star in the center and the various legs going out of it do show what are the tenets which allow us to define it, and the characteristics of a center of gravity as being shown in a MDO are more prominent. It has to be systemic because there is a web of capabilities which sustains the network. If we consider the network as the center of gravity, the effect has to be felt and it has to be more decisive than kinetic. So is disruption, degradation, along with kinetic, using non-kinetic means is also a part of our designing of an operational art. And it is time sensitive. There will be very small windows in which these effects have to be delivered to the enemy and the feedback resulting in further effects being created. Therefore, what I have tried to do is, on the top, I have tried to map out a single analog approach, as was mentioned by one of the speakers in the previous panel, to reach the objective, thereby the center of gravity, and attain the strategic objective. In the lower part, we have tried to draw the lines of operation, lines of effort, through various other domains to reach the same objective. Somewhat, it feels the operational art in the multi-domain characteristic of war will be the lower one. And therefore, coming from single domain, we have to now get into cross-domain. And that has to be persistent throughout because the gray zone is always there. And in cross-domain maneuver, to achieve the effects, we have to synchronize the simultaneity of operations. We have to have non-kinetic disruption, denial, before, after, during operations. And these need not be in the same domain. And the tempo created, the dilemmas created, have to penetrate without mass penetration from the enemy's mind into enemy's networks. And we have to enable a pre-contact disintegration via network-centric, AI-driven command and control, all the while protecting our own. And have a layered, non-linear freedom of operations across all domains. It looks extremely complex, so I look forward to the three speakers to now resolve this problem or the mess which I have created, and we go on to Wing Commander Tripathi.
Jai Hind officers, ladies and gentlemen. At the onset, I would like to convey my gratitude to CDS, Headquarter IDS, and Indian Air Force to bestowing me with the opportunity to speak on the topic of reimagining operational art under the edges of multi-domain operations. No concept in modern military science has intrigued and puzzled the mind of eminent military practitioners than the concept of operational art. Such is the impact of operational art that, if not employed with due diligence and acumen, may result in strategic stagnation and defeat. And one of the finest examples is right in front of us, that is ongoing Iran war. In subsequent discourse, I'll be covering prerequisite of operational art, limitation of in present op planning process, capability orchestration, how to visualize convergence and ensure convergence orchestration. Thereafter, before concluding, I'll be making some recommendations. Winning decisively in shortest amount of time and with the least amount of material is the fundamental goal of operational art. There are two most important prerequisites of operational art. The first one is an operational perspective. That is the ability to clearly and objectively understand the essentials of military and non-military aspects of war zone. Second one is to ensure continuous and effective operational support in terms of intelligence and logistics. There are 9 key concepts of Indian operational art that enables a commander to employ ways and means to obtain desired end. These are center of gravity, lines of operation, deception, operational pause, positional advantages, etc. Likewise, Joint Doctrine of US identifies 13 elements of operational design, which includes operational reach, arranging operations, anticipation, force and functions in addition to Indian design. The age-long established tenets of operational art and its linkages to the various levels of war is being depicted on the slide. It represents the linear structure of idea and practice of organizing campaign for achieving strategic or operational objectives. Leveraging technology is a critical step in maintaining and improving military proficiency. There are certain capability development and key technologies that requires proficiency and certain capability development. The present slides demonstrate the regressive nature of operational art. In this, the political realm is decided below the military realm, and it signifies that the military objectives are decided after the national imperatives are decided first. In this, the operational development follows a pragmatic part, and the military sustainment is joined by continuous acquisition, research and development, training, and infrastructure. This testifies to the reasoning that any kind of national imperative needs to be preceded by modernized force design and subsequently to a specific structure to realize it in operational domain. Leveraging technologies. The multi-domain operations in Indian context reflects India's transition to whole of a nation approach. However, despite its ubiquity in contemporary debate on warfare and prevalence in doctrine remains ambiguous and contested. The review of concept reveals various limitations that can be classified into doctrinal, operational, and inhibitors. Doctrinal issues are the one which may limit employability due to conceptual vagueness. Operational may limit placement due to operational constraints. Inhibitors may limit proper employability during execution due to inadequacies. In order to fully ensure that MDO capability translates into operational realities, these issues need to be resolved. We all are aware that the planning for campaigns is a complex and rigorous activity. This planning process facilitates understanding of a strategic direction. However, the present planning process has inherent shortcomings like operational design do not educate planner on the complex nature of problems and its problem solving. Currently, the methodology focuses more on defining the problem statement than comprehending the problem itself. Framework do not educate planners on creative thinking and cognition. Planners will not comprehend how people think, how groups work together, how both are frequently subjected to different prejudice and biases. Although operational design with respect to Indian context has a deception as its key element, however, a structured publication is absent on deception, whereas such publications are existing in other countries. Leveraging technology is a critical step in maintaining and improving military proficiency. There are certain capability development and key technologies that are to be harnessed for ensuring fusion of MDO with op art. The most significant ones are projected here. The first one being technology fusion, which refers to integration of emerging technologies like space, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence to meet operational objective. Technology fusion can assist in distributed planning and collaboration, followed by resilient communication network and information management. Network serves as the foundation and focal point for MDO. Presently, tri-services networks are not integrated in a seamless manner, and they are not using indigenous waveform with a common communication protocol and format. Network must be capable with multi-domain offense and defense in cyberspace. Subsequently, integrated fire control network, which will enable kill webs, wherein all service will provide offensive and defensive fires in contested environment. This joint fire network must be capable of ensuring suppression of enemy air defenses for enabling ground maneuver. Lastly, the dynamic sustainment, which manifests as distributed and agile logistics. A distributed, robust logistic infrastructure, including autonomy in supply chain, is imperative to avoid enemy sensors and withstand long-range attack. These systems must be integrated to form multi-layer defenses that can adapt to evolving threats and to ensure protection. The subsequent depiction shows a hypothetical scenario for assimilation of artificial intelligence in op art. A force commander is planning an offensive against a peer adversary. The flow diagram is depicting that insights are being generated by AI. These insights are used by commander to fine-tune the plan of action, assign resources, and give precise directives. The visualization platform lowers the uncertainty and enhances cooperation by ensuring that every staff division has a similar operational picture. It demonstrates that AI-driven systems can revolutionize operational planning and also demonstrate shrinking of timelines for execution of tasks. Operational art hinges on seamless integration and synchronization of military forces to generate decisive effect at critical moments. In other words, the outcome lies in symphony of capabilities. As already brought out, that capability development is prime enabler to fulfill key requirements of multi-domain operations. Once these capabilities and requirements are fulfilled, then the forces can be considered to be fully capable and equipped to undertake multi-domain operations. The essence of this notion is depicted in the above process flow. Once the capabilities like agility, tech fusion, common architectures are harnessed, then they will fulfill the requirement of forces, thereby obviating all the limitations of MDO. Once the symphony of capability is achieved, then there are certain decisive, actionable tenets that need to be operationalized for ensuring force deployment. The first one is integrated combined joint force, wherein armed services produces a force that functions by engaging as a whole. Integration must result into mass as a focused application of combat power at a decisive point and time, followed by expanded maneuver, that is the capability of forces to move through space and time along with cyber, electromagnetic spectrum, and cognitive realm, resulting into integrated maneuverist approach. The maneuverist approach can be understood as an attitude of mind that seeks to seize the initiative, fracture the cohesion of adversary by applying strength against vulnerability as indirect approaches. Subsequently, the heart of MDO, that is pulsed operations. It is a type of joint all-domain operations characterized by deliberate application of joint force strength to generate or exploit advantages over adversary, followed by arrangement of military action in time, space, and purpose to produce maximum relative combat power at a decisive place and time, called as synchronization. Convergence is a key term with MDO-related concepts. and therefore visualizing convergence is the core of MDO-fused operational art. Operational art in Indian Defense Forces needs to transition from domain-centric sequencing to convergence orchestration to achieve decision dominance at critical nodes. The figure illustrates the visualization of MDO convergence. The figure has two projection planes, one causal and effect plane. Causal plane is the one where the operation in domains are planned and carried out. The both causal and effect plane are linked, wherein the effect of causal plane is realized in effect plane. The effect plane has three thresholds based on the impact of operations, which can be strategic, operational, and tactical. The concept of convergence can be better assimilated in this two-dimensional depiction of operation cycle for MDO. The picture represents planning and preparation in respective ATO cycles. The first purple star is the time where the forces are placing resources for operations. Subsequently, commander directs a show of force at AE with small engagements for particular troops, followed by consolidation of gains. After this, the unit within the domains are prepared, but commander carries out a deception operation during BC. Commander then successfully shifts the major efforts to breach and destroy the line of enemy main force during BE, reaching the key point for mission success. All this can be summoned as a convergence in operation. Putting all this together, we can visualize convergence in three dimensions. It can be construed in terms of plane called as convergence plane. Convergence implies that effect from all domains will be integrated and synchronized instead of deconflicting their effects during planning and targeting. This will allow commanders to simultaneously and continuously engage targets for set of targets with a variety of kinetic and non-kinetic effectors. With time, all these ops will merge towards a singular goal. This merger in time and space can be called as convergence in effect. Developing an architecture that smoothly unifies various domains into a coherent entity is essential to master multi-domain coordination. Therefore, in order to develop an operational art with convergence orchestration, the system process needs to be dynamic and adaptive. The proposed architecture is segregated into 5 segments, namely planning, pre-execution, execution, consolidation, and termination. The first segment is planning segment, which consists of distributed planning and collaboration like cloud-based platforms with embedded AI to collaborate and synchronize plans, followed by integration and technology fusion to ensure enhanced center of gravity analysis, where complex linkages between enemy capabilities and weakness are mapped. Advanced visualization platforms can provide clear and interactive representation of complex problem. Thereby, commander can employ a specific defeat mechanism like maneuver or attritional. Finally, the key to resilience is anticipating disruptions before they occur, because every system can be attacked. The system can run countless simulations, identify potential vulnerabilities, and suggest mitigation. The planning phase will be followed by pre-execution segment. Here, the most important activity will be prioritization. The concept of MDO embodies 4 factors, namely combined arms synchronization, dispersion and concealment, adaptation battles, and logistic sufficiencies. These all factors act in natural tension with each other. Here, the commander needs to imply his intent via prioritizing the required type of tenet with respect to MDO, thereby laying down foundations for effective synchronization. Followed by unified command and control, wherein command and control must be decentralized yet unified to facilitate rapid decision-making across operational zone. The C2 must provide info superiority as every aspect of conflict is integrated into single framework through network-centric operations by using various sensors and automated systems. This information superiority will replicate in decisions superiority. This is followed by logistics sustainment and dynamic logistics as already brought out in harnessing technology and capability development portion. This follows the core of MDO, that is execution segment, in other words, orchestration of multi-domain campaign. Synchronized operation across all domain is a coordinated effort that converges towards singular outcome. All domain forces provide cross-domain support for pulsed operation and other line of operations. This agility and fluidity keeps enemy off balance. Towards end, we have consolidation segment in which the most significant aspect is feedback loop. This refers to continuous adaptation and consolidation. Because real-time adaptation is inherent requirement for MDO, this feedback loop guarantees constant synchronization across all domain. The feedback loop initiates adaptive operations in a different domain based on change in adversary's behavior. The system recognizes change in battlefield and modifies tactics even before enemy can react. At last, the termination phase, which is similar to conventional op-art layout. However, success of all military ops is singularly dependent upon a credible, actionable intelligence. And it has been rightly said that if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not to fear the result of 100 battles. China has developed its own victory strategy to counter MDO, which have parallels with some of the conceptualization of MDO. It is being called system of systems and can categorized into two: narrow for actual physical contact war scenario and broad, which encompasses economic, political, and warfare by other means. Each strategy relies on intelligentization of concept and equipment along with targeting enemy systems in an algorithmic manner. These references become more significant because Pakistan is already showing its stress in its force modernization and thereby likely to employ target-centric warfare in subsequent operations. Towards this, I would like to recommend creation of an integrated steering committee with joint board of directors from military and non-military services. The committee will identify key technologies and capabilities along with preparing a roadmap for creating an ecosystem with military and industry stakeholders to provide solutions. The committee must lay down a vision for capability-based force transformation for credible force design within fixed timelines. A joint integration group to be formed for resolving doctrinal and operational limitation of MDO. The group must derive inter-service agreement based on the lines of US Army and Air Force for multi-domain integration. Although Joint Intelligence Committee has been established, however, a Joint Intelligence Analysis Center is the need of hour. Further, it is recommended to establish an MDO system integration lab where highly qualified experts can contribute towards doctrinal instruction and refinement. Further, it will be befitting to address MDO with Indian context at Samagra Sankriya, aligning with our civilizational knowledge of warfare. Wargaming and experiential learning should be central to professional military education and training. And effective operational art requires both doctrinal mastery and willingness to innovate and adapt under pressure. Experience are the most effective antidote to intellectual complacency and process-driven inertia. In addition, there is an implicit requirement to look into low-cost, mass-produced, asymmetric indigenous weapon solution for defeating target-centric warfare. With this, I would like to conclude that op-art must be reimagined in a manner wherein command must be retooled around temporal compression as opposed to sequential phasing of tactical action. This calls for attributable platforms and enable numerical mass, redundant logistic, and mobile basing to prevent single-point failures. The capability to undertake pulsed op, extended maneuvers, dynamic sustainment, and technology fusion sits at the core of MDO-based operational art. Jai Hind.
Compliments, Abhishek. That was a very excellent paper which brought out tangible recommendations with related to convergence and convergence architecture. Your recommendations of integrated steering committee, identifying the key technologies, and op deployment vision based on a physical reality of a capability-based force transformation will require to be analyzed. A joint integration group formation to derive inter-service agreements is a good idea. MDO system integration lab has to be progressed if we have to get into this realm of MDO and planning in MDO. You have brought out the shortcomings of operational art and brought out actionable tenets very well. The slow tempo of gray zone, how it will affect the OODA loop requires to be analyzed further, because that is what will be a constant, and that is in our national context will always be there. So therefore, having decision dominance at all times will require integration of command and control of the three services, not centralized, but with dispersion. Because the center of gravity at different times of different adversaries will have to be dealt with in a different manner, in a different environment. So we'll have to look ahead in the question hour to address these things. I now request the next speaker.
Good morning, officers, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. I thank Headquarter IDS, Indian Air Force, for giving me this opportunity to present my paper in Run Samvad 2026. My paper is Moving from Information Saturation to Decision Superiority in MDO. The paper examines a fundamental shift in the character of warfare, that is, from platform-centric operations to information-centric competition. War in 21st century is defined by information coherence. Today, victory is no longer determined by number of platforms we deploy, but how effectively we integrate information and how quickly we convert that information into decisive action. Problem definition for the scope is, there are so many sensors across services. So what are the gaps to be filled to achieve interoperable C2 and cohesive decision making? So scope will be limited to above problem statement, as other points have been covered by other speakers. Warfare today is defined by following realities. First, an explosion of sensors across all domains. Second, convergence of land, sea, air, space, cyber and information domains. And third, an unprecedented volumes of data. However, this creates a paradox. More sensors are not giving us better clarity. They are increasing data overload and slowing decision making. So the core problem is not lack of ISR capability. Already there are many ISR assets across all three services, and a lot of more are coming also. The real issue is information saturation and fragmentation. This is due to service-specific architectures, non-uniform data links, different encryption standards, and absence of unified data fabric. As a result, information exists, but decision-making is delayed. More sensors are leading to more confusion and hence slower decisions. The OODA loop remains central to operational thought across services. In multi-domain operation, each loop is digitally mediated, so multi-domain operations represent convergence of domains rather than joint coordination to shorten OODA. In modern warfare, this loop is no longer linear. It is distributed, it is digital, it is multi-domain. Observation occurs through ISR grids, orientation is enabled by AI data fusion, decision takes place at integrated command levels, and action is executed through cross-domain effects. The speed of this loop defines combat advantage. Recent conflicts clearly demonstrate this reality. In the Ukraine conflict, we have seen real-time ISR to strike integration. Low-cost drone provide live surveillance, artillery is corrected in real time, and battle damage is assessed immediately. the sensing to shooting loop is compressed. In Nagorno-Karabakh, ISR integrated with loitering munitions and EW led to autonomous target engagement and rapid destruction of air defenses. Traditional defenses collapsed, not because they lacked strength, but because they lacked integration and interoperability. In Iran-Israel-US conflict, we are witnessing drone attacks, precision airstrikes, AI-assisted targeting, and electronic warfare dominance. The lesson is clear. The side that compresses the sensing to shooting loop dominates the battle space. Coming to our own experience, Operation Sindhu demonstrated operational maturity through calibrated response, layered air defense, and escalation control. But Op Sindhu also revealed the critical necessity for multi-domain integration across services. India today has strong platforms, functional systems like IACCS, CMS, BMS, and substantial ISR capability. However, integration and interoperability need improvement. We also lack a unified tri-services communication grid and a common data fabric. This creates a gap between capability and coherence. However, it also highlighted a structural truth. Coordination under pressure is not architectural interoperability. To address this, we require integrated structures. This includes compressed OODA loops through time compression, secure and high bandwidth data links which can interoperate, AI-enabled data fusion in real time, and a coherent tri-services response. The objective is cross-domain synchronization at speed. Globally, two distinct models are emerging. The United States has adopted a structured approach for MDO. Department of Defense has conceptualized Joint All-Domain Command and Control as digital backbone. This links sensors and shooters across all domains in real time. An operational experiment under the US Air Force has been Advanced Data Battle Management System. This shows that experimentation should precede operationalization. So, USA has ZC2 as architecture, ABMS as platform, and Combat Cloud as concept. Their guiding principle is architecture must precede autonomy. On the other hand, China has integrated capabilities under Strategic Support Force. They have outlined its change around concept of individualized warfare. This is by integrating AI, big data, EW, and network command control structures to achieve information dominance. Under reforms initiated by CMC, they have established the PLA Strategic Support Force to strengthen space, cyber, electronic warfare, and psychological domains. They target systems, not platform. For India, the challenge lies in interoperability. Indian Armed Forces possess strong individual capabilities. IF operates IACCS, it fuses radars, airborne early warning, US feeds, and interceptor grids. The Indian Navy maintains maritime surveillance networks adapted for sea domain operations. Indian Army engages tactical air defense and battlefield surveillance systems. However, these systems have evolved along service-specific paths. We face encryption standard variations, metadata differences, data sharing and protocol differences, and lack millisecond-level time synchronization. In high-speed warfare, milliseconds define outcome. Critical enabler here are secure ODLs, software-defined radios. They provide frequency agility, dynamic networking, and adaptability. However, without standardization and addressing specific requirements of each service for data, speed, reach, and bandwidth, they can increase complexity rather than reduce it. Interoperability must be designed, not improvised. Airspace is inherently joint, yet responsibility of its control and defense rests primarily with IAF. IACCS clearly already functions as a national brain, fusing multi-source data into coherent air picture. It is a systems of system architecture, which each node has their own essay. They fight together when connected, but are prepared to fight alone too. As seen in recent conflicts across globe, air operations are becoming first choice rather than late entrants in the conflict. Hence, air defense decisions and responsibilities are growing at rapid pace. Cruise missiles, swarm drones, and emerging hypersonic threats reduce timelines further. Further distinction between air and space domain is reducing. Given all the above requirements and the pace, IF fits to serve as air and aerospace ISR node to lead within tri-services. This does not centralize authority. It centralizes coherence. Delegated engagement authority remains with commanders, but underlying data fabric must be unified across all services. In this context, for air defense, IACCS becomes the core. It can evolve into a multi-domain ISR backbone in aerospace domain across services. It is a good use case to follow for everybody. However, before evolving MDO systems across tri-services comes architecture. A combined architecture must begin with consistent, machine-readable data across Army, Navy, Air Force. Sensors, platforms, and command nodes must speak common digital language. When data structures differ across services, transformation layers introduce latency. They degrade trust in operational picture. Architecture should have inbuilt redundancy and be distributed. They should have one main, one standby, and one redundant architecture. Equally essential is metadata tagging. Data without background is just noise. Every data point must carry characteristics that define its origin, timestamp, confidence level, classification, and significance. Common geospatial reference structures form another important pillar. As MDO unfold across domains, without coordinated systems and geospatial standards, cross-domain targeting and airspace deconflict becomes error-prone. Secure and interoperable data links are the connection for this architecture. These links must allow real-time exchange of information across services without compromising on security. Interoperability cannot be a late addition. It must be rooted in design. Also important is that data links are reliable, have high bandwidth, speed, and reach. Time synchronization is equally decisive. In high-tempo air defense or precision strikes, milliseconds matter. Sensor fusion depends upon accurate alignment of data streams. If timestamps are inconsistent, operational picture becomes distorted. Without fixing architecture and going for MDO, it will only accelerate confusion. The integrating concept is the combat cloud. It is a unified network linking all domains. A sovereign combat cloud must integrate IACCS, naval grids, Army air defense nodes, space ISR, and cyber monitoring layers. It enables a common all-domain operational picture. AI is being spoken all around throughout this conference. At present, artificial intelligence is an enabler only. Its role is not autonomy alone, but time compression. AI acts as the core enabler by integrating data, accelerating decisions, and automating execution. In multi-sensor data fusion, AI correlates inputs from ISR, EW systems, and satellites to create a real-time common operating picture. As decision support, AI-driven analytics provide commanders with courses of action. Electronic pilot is an example where AI assists operators and pilots with threat detection, route optimization, sensor management, and mission execution, thus enhancing human performance under high workload. Autonomy through AI enables unmanned systems, swarms, collaborative aircraft to operate with minimum human intervention in contested environments. For predictive maintenance, AI analyzes platform health data to predict failures, improve fleet availability, and can ensure mission readiness across all services. For big data handling, AI processes high volume, high velocity, and variety of data. It ensures veracity and extract value for actionable intelligence. AI can best optimize workflows. It automates routine processes, logistics, and command workflows. AI compresses the orientation phase of UDA. However, at present, command responsibility with AI still remains human. Commanders define intent, exercise judgment, and authorize action. AI recommends, prioritizes, and supports decisions. Execution layers carry out implementation. AI accelerates decision, but human retain accountability. To support all this, we require big data governance. Integration for multi-domain ISR requires systematic big data management across Army, Navy, and the Air Force. Modern ISR ecosystem generate terabytes of data daily. A federated data lake architecture should allow each service to maintain domain-optimized repositories while contributing to a shared combat cloud layer. Edge nodes must filter data and validate data before transmission. There has to be a trade-off between data-hungry systems and data-frugal systems in the architecture. Cyber integrity safeguards are essential to prevent data poisoning or manipulation. A shared pipeline is from sensors, edge processing, data lake, AI, and finally to command and control. This is to be done with federated architecture and cyber security. Equally important is AI certification. While working at ADA, I realized how difficult it is to get data from field units to designers, and further how difficult it is to put a basic AI ML model to get meaningful output out of simple technical data set. It took some time and effort to streamline process and architecture there. So we must ensure explainability of outputs, trust gates for autonomy, and robustness. Data set integrity should be ensured. And human control till maturity of AI models is mandatory. I recommend India should consider establishing a defense AI certification authority under existing structures to hasten a process. Without certification, AI will remain experimental. Transforming India's multi-domain ISR architecture cannot occur through sudden jumps. It requires a phased roadmap that aligns with reforms across services, technological development, and evolution of doctrines. Integration must mature progressively with clearly defined validation steps. Speeding up incorporation without assurance risks instability, but sequencing with discipline builds trust. The transition must follow a roadmap. The initial phase must focus on data standardization and architecture. AI during this phase mainly assists by supporting mission planning, predictive maintenance, and decision support, rather than performing mission-critical functions. Once initial architecture stabilizes, attention should shift towards experimentation for operational use. This phase should prioritize prototypes, collaborative systems, swarm trials, sensor integration, and joint testing. AI-enabled fusion mechanisms can begin integrating live multi-domain data streams in controlled operational environments. In phase 3, it should transit from experimental or prototype units to operational units. AI-enabled decision support may assume greater responsibility in prioritization of threat, sequencing of air defense, and optimization of real-time missions. The final phase imagines a mature, resilient, and sovereign combat cloud, C2, and ISR architecture. AI-enabled autonomous system, swarm drones, CCAs, distributed sensor networks, and cross-domain decision mechanisms would operate within a fully integrated TIE services ecosystem by now. But the caution is, this is that the progression from phase 1 to phase 4 must remain conditional. Move from one phase to next is upon successful validation of each stage. Point is, trust must be built, not assumed. Strategic imperative in MDO is that India must ensure development of sovereign AI capability, certification, indigenous systems, data links, sensors, and resilient networks. Further, we should ensure interoperability and standardization across services. Dependence on partial integration will equal vulnerability. Hence, the desired end state is very clear. An integrated combat cloud delivering decision superiority and credible deterrence. To conclude, those who see together, understand together, decide faster, and act decisively will ultimately prevail. Thank you, sirs, and Jai Hind.
Thank you, Air Commodore Virk. It was very well brought out. You built up from platform-centric to information-centric and gave out why networks integration is going to lead to a decisive end to any conflict in the future. The scope of ISR across all domains was very well covered, and the OODA loop connected it to how OPART will be designed in the future. But we have to realize that OODA loop is also part of the cognitive domain. If with AI we run it faster, the environment in the cognitive domain changes that rapidly. And it is not always a sensing to shooting event that we will be planning for. In normal circumstances, it may be sensing to a EW event, a directed energy weapon event, or even a cyber event, which may be part of the loop. So the networking becomes that much more important. The communication grid is important, which you develop to lead up to the combat cloud. But again, we have to realize that it will have to be a dispersed cloud given the environment which we are in. It can't have a common cloud for the entire nation. It will have to be dispersed to create more resilience in the structure and redundancy. It is appreciated that you gave out a time plot of almost 5+ years, reach a fully integrated AI-enabled combat cloud, so that in future our cross-domain operations are fruitful. Thank you. I request the next speaker.
Chief of Defense Staff, senior officers, distinguished members of the audience. The topic of my talk is force development for multi-domain operations. I will begin with some key considerations of force structuring, which will be followed by a presentation of a hierarchical design for multi-domain operations, during which I will also present one of the operational scenarios for a multi-domain force in a joint environment. I will thereafter talk about some force structuring challenges in MDO, as well as shaping an ecosystem that will help us to shape MDO. I will also address some potential pitfalls of MDO and conclude with some recommendations. I say that there are 6 key considerations which we must have in mind while designing force structuring for MDO. The first is that war is merely an extension of politics. Therefore, the concept of whole of nation approach is not embedded merely in MDO, but in the concept of war itself. This was also brought out by the AOC in Sea Training Command in his opening address yesterday. What it means for us is that the services cannot afford to look at MDO in isolation, but must also include the non-military component in it as well. Secondly, MDO will be applicable at each level of conflict, from the national strategic to the tactical. The third consideration is flexibility, not only in organization, but also in operations as well. Organizationally, we must have bespoke command and control organization at each level, as also the attended command and control structures, the network and communications. Even interoperability differs at each level because the stakeholders are different. As far as operations are concerned, MDO must be designed for task, considering the operational environment, the resources that are needed or that are available, and the scale at which we want to conduct the MDO. For example, a naval task group in a SLOC protection or an anti-piracy mission may not need all the cross-domain capabilities. And similarly, a brigade in defensive operations in mountains may not depend on the maritime domain at all. Fourth point is integration of non-military component. This was addressed by Colonel Ankush Goyal in the first session, and this slide shows the plethora of non-military agencies which are involved or which have a stake in operations. And these operations themselves range from the benign part of the spectrum, which includes HADR and search and rescue, to low-intensity operations, and to the right side of the spectrum, which is high-intensity conflict. And yesterday, Admiral Luthra had mentioned that in each part, at each level of each type of MDO, the stakeholders will be different. So this has to be carefully thought out. Fifthly, MDO is underpinned by technology. Today, we are able to talk about MDO is because of the capabilities that technology now gives us to have all the cross-domain capabilities in one unit or in a single center of military power. I am only showing a few of the critical technologies, but there are others as well. Sixthly, there are certain prerequisites for MDO which have been spelled out in the joint MDO doctrine. These include the technological prerequisites, which include the AI-powered common operational planning process, satellite communication, a common all-domain operational picture, etc. For the infrastructure and policy prerequisites, the doctrine says that we should have a multi-domain operations room, cyber and space resilience, HR policies, and so on and so forth. Now I will present a hierarchy of MDO. As I said earlier, MDO is applicable at all levels of warfare. But it is at the national strategic level that it is most relevant, because the number of stakeholders are many. At military strategic level and below, the stakeholders are fewer and fewer, and at the operational and the tactical level, the MDO will, the stakeholders as well the MDO's context will usually depend on the context in which MDO is being talked about. This slide shows indication of the MDO linkages at the national strategic level. As is visible in the slide, it includes the military component, but more than that, a plethora of non-military component. And it is here that we need to focus our MDO efforts. The broken lines in this slide show the existing linkages, but as yesterday FOCC South had brought out, that this is definitely not adequate, and he had spoken about an MDO coordination council. I have also suggest that there are 5 lines of MDO lines of effort at this level, which can be progressed by many agencies in concert. At the military strategic level, MDO can be visualized, as shown on the slide, with the service headquarters and HQ IDS positioned at the apex level. As in the previous slide, there are again certain military stakeholders as well as non-military stakeholders, and these again have to be integrated. At the lower part of this slide, you can see I have illustrated the operational level as well, wherein I have used multi-domain task force terminology. This is a term I have borrowed from the US Army's lexicon, but we can also have our own terms. It is at this level that the multi-domain operations room, which has been spelled out in the doctrine, can be visualized at the service headquarters level and below, and also the common operational domain operational picture.
These particular subjects. So at one level, we talk about MDO today. A couple of speakers were speaking about multi-domain operations at a very apex or a national level. I thought which was more for coordination, and it was more for at the operational level. And at the other level, there were also a lot of ideas on use of artificial intelligence in future for multi-domain operations. So this theme for this second edition of Run Samvad was, I think, very, very relevant.
Prakash Singh to deliver his talk. Thank you.
is itself a statement of institutional maturity. While giving this particular closing address, it carries a few kind of a responsibility for me that I must honor what has been said, draw a diverse threads into some kind of coherence, and point a way forward. I'll attempt all three together. Let me begin by one of the most fundamental things on which the outcome of any kind of a combat is dependent. I think I spoke about it yesterday also. It basically depends on two things. That is a correct decision being taken and a timely decision being taken. And both of them are interconnected. A correct decision that is taken late got no value. Similarly, a wrong decision, even if taken time, that will be even more catastrophic than the first one. So both these qualities form a kind of a feedback loop, and they're dependent on each other for success. This is not a new observation at all. Every commander from antiquity has understood.
Thereafter, I'll discuss on MDO with a redefined vision of
Boyd of the United States Air Force, who gave it a formal architecture or the famous
foundations. I shall touch upon the implementation timelines.
Boyd's insight and elegant lay in its simplicity. Whosoever completes this particular cycle faster than the adversary will win a combat, and the platform or the sophistication of platform.
And as has been narrated in many a times, that although primarily an
cycle faster than the other, and you're putting
military response to a trigger situation. The result-oriented joint operations,
while whatever John Boyd said was true, but I think,
but also a well-calibrated mix of punitive and deterrence at the same time.
Moment that there may be a changes in this kind of an OODA loop together. Today we have advanced data analytics, we have advanced algorithms and artificial intelligence, which can be predictive in nature, which can
construct. We are well aware of what jointness means in a classical sense. However, I will focus on what jointness in practice is. In practice, jointness has often been mixed with administrative and symbolic integration. Joint education, logistics, maintenance, transport, procurement, and support frameworks are frequently
data analytics. You may be able to decide what courses of action enemy has and what will you do in that particular case. So the cycle may change out
rather than indicators of operational jointness. They
act upon it. So that brings the order cycle even faster than what Colonel John Boyd had
controlled and employed in conflict.
That we'll be seeing in our particular lifetime. Yesterday, I did speak about warfare moving from physical realm to synthetic and cognitive.
Then debates over control of air defense operations.
Just today, I will put my views on it. There are only my views, and that's not the institutional view, because we all are free to, in this kind of a forum, air their views. So since there was the
C2 architecture for planning and operations remains predominantly service-centric and has been the case with
Let me put my view.
Joint Services Study Group on air defense till date. This reality defines the baseline from which the more...
Ever since man has been there, warfare has been there, been fighting with each other as tribes and organized armed forces, etc. All warfare till now has been in physical domain, where there's contact.
Have yet to achieve the desired operational coherence. Operational experiences indicate,
which is synthetic in nature and cognitive in nature, is actually for us difficult to understand. Warfare also
existing joint PME between the services right from training.
Combat it is at a military level, and there you may say physical domains which you actually see are maybe important. But when you see warfare, total war as such, it's at a political level. We heard that Clausewitz statement that war is a continuation of politics by other means. So
interpretation often shaped by individual convenience of
that level of warfare, like we see in the ongoing warfare. US and Israel may have won more than 95% of all kind of combat missions, because of their fighting in that physical domain. But did they actually really win the war or the outcome of it? That the jury is yet to be out on it, so that could be debatable. So
the joint doctrine
is, when I said that, war is subordinate to politics and especially
domain. While it did not explicitly address MDO, it acknowledged.
And they survive because of that. And today we know that public opinion can be manipulated, it can be molded, it can be changed. And if you do that, especially in smaller countries, you're
and knowledge base. Nevertheless, these initiatives have
So hence, ultimately, why was war there? War was there for political aims. And if you can do that thing without actually combat and by different kind of a means, which we see actually happening around us, so maybe people have heard about it, then of course, it's a different kind of a realm which we are talking about. So when
broad conceptual jointness doctrines
then it's difficult for us to understand, because all throughout history, we have seen warfare only in the physical kind of a domain. So that I thought was important. We've spoken about domain. Now let me, I won't say confused, but let me add another element to it. I'll add an element of dimension to it. Domains may be
knowledge, cognitive effect as operationally significant. Although the doctrine marks an important doctrinal advance and outlines key characteristics,
spoke about dimensions of warfare. Essentially warfare, whenever it's in the physical realm, we've seen it was two-dimensional, probably invention of aircrafts, etc., put a third dimension to this warfare. But today, again, we are at a cusp of a moment where you can say time is the fourth dimension of
can be employed, maneuvered, contested, and controlled to achieve military objectives.
And then there are speeds of different kind of speeds and nature, slow-moving, very, very slow-moving, and very, very fast-moving targets. Some
territorial gain, sea control, air superiority, or space denial. In contrast, the cognitive
reach there in fractions of minutes and seconds. And in cyber domain, probably we were there instantaneously. So as far as the adversary, all of us are concerned, to understand this new dimension of time in which events are occurring at various speeds is itself challenging. So we need to
existence, no terror,
and expanded time on the same battlefield, because then it creates a new kind of a dimension. Similarly, maybe if you again look at it as a different realm, so cyber and electromagnetic
perception, decision-making, etc., are the outcomes of
dimension of warfare, and the seventh dimension could be cognitive warfare. So we are maybe moving into an era of not only multi-domain, but multi-dimensional warfare in future. Let me now try and talk about
also
convergence, which is, I think, a bedrock or very essential for whatever we're talking about. This is the next stage of warfare. At one level, we are trying to converge kinetic
as an operational vector or capabilities.
Manned with unmanned, manual with autonomous, and old domains with new domains of warfare. And at the next level, we see convergence of the three realms which are spoke about, the new dimensions which are spoken about, which is creating, say, multi-domain operations, multi-dimensional operations, and operations acting in.
VOSA addresses the foundational challenge of
what is the effect of all this is not destruction. It's actually a paralysis of the mind of the adversary that occurs, because it's a combination of all these factors. At the lower end, it may be just related to destruction.
VOSA constitutes the operational foundation, while VONA is its strategic extension, and reversing this sequence will definitely weaken execution. So to sum up this section, the image presents physical domains of warfare, that is land, sea, air, and space. The subsurface, that is undersea domain, has received very limited attention in the Western discourse.
On policies, and which is based on a common understanding. That will give you the true capability of conduct of multi.
Also find a prominent place.
Future. There are wonderful suggestions which have come about, and I'm sure the CNC Training Command would finally compile them and send them to headquarter ideas for their further examination. From my side, this is all what I wanted to tell you people. Toward the end, I would like to thank the defense attaches of a friendly foreign country.
While these services play
and the perspective you may have got from here, The security challenges of our era do not respect borders, and the quality of dialogue between like-minded persons is of immense value, especially in this contested kind of a world. To the members of the media who are here, I hope you carry from here not just a story for today, but a frame for larger conversation about what modern defense readiness actually requires and what is the requirement of the future. I think that's all I have to say. They have also given me a check to say that Run Samvad 2027 will be conducted by the Indian Navy in second week of April 2027. And the theme for that particular seminar would be high-intensity operations in a transparent and expanded battle space, challenges for force application and force application. So the sub-themes, etc., will be derived by the Naval War College Vice Chief of Naval Staff and be told to all people. And giving this advance warning, advance notice rather, to all of you, and that's especially for the younger generation and middle-level officers, because those 6 officers not only got a commendation card, but all of them got a check for 1 lakh rupees each.
Effective adoption of MDML demands an Indianized
better participation from all of you for the next series of Run Samvad, that's Run Samvad 3. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. Thank you.
Of MDML.
May I now request Air Vice Marshal P.A. Shah, Ati Vishish Seva Medal, Vayu Sena Medal, Commandant, College of Air Warfare, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Will be beneficial. These cells can plan and execute inter-service.
General Anil Chauhan, Chief of the Defense Staff, General Bhupendra Dwivedi, Chief of Army Staff, former chiefs of the Air Force and the Navy.
Rather than reinventing structures, leveraging time-tested mechanism from
academia, media, and my fellow warfare practitioners. Jai Hind. It is both an honor and a privilege to stand before this distinguished gathering and deliver this vote of thanks at the close of Run Samvad 2026. Over the last 2 days, we have engaged
evolve in what
unflinching deliberation on multi-domain operations, an idea that has moved beyond concept to become a pressing operational imperative, forged by the relentless evolution of modern warfare. As was powerfully articulated in the opening session,
effective template could be derived from simple detection.
Discussions have been rich, candid, and profoundly forward-looking. They have spanned the entire spectrum of conflict, from the changing character of war and the dramatic compression of decision cycles to the hard realities of convergences required across land, sea, air, space, cyber, and cognitive domains. However, what lingers most powerfully is not merely the breadth of ground covered, but the crystal clarity that we have gained on the central challenge before us, and that is translating bold
to build up the operational capacity. Indicated image.
It is also humbling to recognize that for all that we have achieved, we have only just begun the journey towards our ultimate goal. We must believe all of us are smarter than each one of us.
Voice, data, video architecture for inter-domain communication.
This seminar may seem abstract. They are still our marching orders. As has been rightly emphasized, multi-domain operations is not
C2 to digital C7 ISR and slowly graduating to quantum and AI embedded.
One that must firmly remain rooted.
ISR services have yet not been able to bridge gap amongst themselves, which
relentless innovation. On behalf of every single delegate present, I extend our deepest gratitude to the Chief of Defense Staff for his visionary guidance, which has shaped both the direction and the very substance of the Run Samvad series. I also say thanks to the Chief of Army Staff, the Chief of Naval Staff, the CISC, and to the Vice Chief of Air Staff in anticipation, sir, for their insight and visualization of MDO. My gratitude likewise goes to the Air Officer Commanding-in-Chief of Training Command and his staff for steadfast direction and wholehearted support in bringing this event to fruition. I further acknowledge the outstanding efforts of Headquarter IDS and all the service headquarters in securing wide participation and curating the finest ideas, thereby ensuring a fruitful discussion. I must also compliment the painstaking efforts and meticulous planning of the entire team at the Air Force Technical College and the College of Air Warfare, which ensure
environment. The rest I leave to the next speaker to elaborate.
I place on record our profound gratitude to all the distinguished speakers, panelists, and contributors. Your hard-won experience and intellectual rigor have immeasurably enriched the discussions. The active participation
must also be fully enmeshed to enable meaningful MDML warfare, particularly with respect to the emerging domain
that are indispensable to forging a genuinely integrated approach to MDO. I would also like to thank the media present here for carrying this message across the land.
domains and functions are staffed by individuals who are otherwise deemed unsuitable for the mainstream roles. Net result is that these workforces either don't deliver as desired, or when they bring credibility to the domains and functions, there is no career progression.
Solid foundation upon which all of us must now build. As we conclude, let us depart with a renewed and shared resolve to move decisively from concept to capability, from discussion to design, and from intent to integration.
That demands a closed-door, open-minded, realistic, and empathetic deliberations.
We will do more than merely adapt to the changing character of war. We will be able to shape it on our own terms. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Actions result in quantifiable and qualitative institutional result that go beyond personal gains needs examination. To address this, a committed, impartial, apartisan Indian National Defense University is desperately needed to plan, execute, and simplify critical military requirements at the strategic and operational level, along with offering a layered PAB to the services.
All those for the second session, please be seated by 1425 hours.
Bottom up and not driven top down through rhetoric. Is not new. It has been articulated repeatedly in our doctrines and discussions and is a sound operational philosophy. But despite that, it hasn't been fully internalized.